As a photographer, I've always been fascinated by light. Beautiful light can elevate a mundane object, even such as a tape dispenser, and make it into a work of art. But before you can create beautiful lighting, you've got to understand the laws of light and those limitations. You've got to be able to manipulate those limitations. First, light travels in a straight line. That's pretty common sense. We all know that. Second, the angle of reflection equals the angle of incidence. And last, there's the inverse square law. Basically, twice the distance, half the light. Those are all things as photographers we know simply by working with light. Back in 1985, I was doing a shot of a beautiful tomato, and I wanted to skim the light around the surface, around that curved surface. I knew that if I could keep the light at the optimum angle of incidence, I would have beautiful color saturation. That's the main thing about the angle of incidence. If it's right, you'll have incredible saturation. You'll also have better detail, and the modeling of the surface contour will be more beautiful. There's just one problem. Light travels in a straight line. I can't have a light on a stand and have it skim around the surface of anything. But if I can take that light and put it into a fiber optic bundle, I can bend it any direction I want. Now I can skim the light around the tomato. But to control that light, I found I had to be very close to the tomato, maybe a ½ inch from its surface, and this is where the inverse square law comes in. And I think this is the real difference that I brought to light painting. By working very close to the object that I'm painting, it alone is illuminated because of the fall off from the light. I found that I had complete control over spill light, over shadows, and of course over highlights. And since I was individually illuminating props on the set, that meant that I was free to light each of them in whatever way I felt was optimum. So light painting is a technique. It's a technique to massage the laws of light, to allow a photographer to go beyond the laws of light as they apply in real time. Painting with light is a layering technique. Now, I've done that for years, as most of us in still life photography have, doing multiple exposure. This is simply a way to layer light with far more control. What it is not is it's not a style. Style is something that you create out of the combination of your own artistic sense and your own skill in painting with light. Back in 1985, when I started painting with light, there was no system specifically designed to do that. So I had to build my own. This is the fiber optic bundle that I mentioned. Now, the light comes from the power supply, which is right down here in this box. It comes through the fiber optic bundle up to the beam control unit. Now, the beam control unit has different sizes and shapes of masks to control the light. The beam control unit is a bayonet mount so that it accepts other accessories right here. Now, the other important part to the system is the shutter system. Now, it's right in front of the camera. If I push this button, it opens. Push it, it closes. Now, the other part of it is the soft filter. And I've got a button right here on the hose that controls that. You can see that going in and out there. Now, what we're going to do next is a basic exposure using a HOSEMASTER. Before we make an exposure of these props on the surface here, let me tell you a little bit about how I'm going to go about doing it. First of all, it would be in the dark, a very near dark studio. It doesn't have to be pitch black because we're shooting at an f-stop of about 32.5. Usually I'm 32.5 to 45.5 on a still life like this, and I'm using daylight balance film, in this case Ektachrome 100 plus. The camera is on T, so that once I open the shutter, it is going to stay open at that f-stop. Now, the first thing I have to do is to lay down an exposure that's underexposed, and I'll do that with a strobe. The softbox above me is synced
to the lens, so that once I open that lens, that's going to flash. Then I go on in and I do the light painting on all the props. Now the reason I do that first exposure is I need to lay down, I need to control the contrast. And the way to do that is to lay down an underexposed image first. If I want it low contrast, I'm going to be 1 stop, 1.5 stops underexposed. If I want it very contrasty, maybe 2 stops, 2.5 stops underexposed. So let's go ahead and dim the lights, and we'll try an exposure on this. Okay, our slide's pulled, we're cocked. First thing I've got to do is open the HOSEMASTER shutter. Now you'll hear a beep. That beeps every second. That tells you that the shutter is open, and that's also how I keep track of the exposure. Okay, soft filter is in. We'll hit the shutter. There goes the flash. So now we've got that underexposed image on the film, so we'll go in and we'll start painting. First what I would do is I would go in, I've got the soft filter in, I'm going to build up a little bit of exposure, a nice halo around this vase. Okay, now without the soft in, I'm going to come in here and build up kind of a round shape on the vase. About a 4-second exposure. Next I'm going to go in on the bone. So I'm going to go for a smaller mask though. Let's see, I'll go for a medium oval shape. So I'll do the front of the bone here. Now you can see the importance of the shutter. First I've got to figure out how I'm going to play the light across the bone or other props. And I've got to see what happens to that spill, see. Okay, here we go. Give it about 3 seconds there. Then I'm going to follow the shape of the bone. Okay, and I practice a little bit until I've got the light painting the way I want. There we go. All right. Now, I want to come in and paint some light on this stone, but I've already painted light on the bone, so that's going to build up more exposure on the bone, and I don't want that. So what I can do is I can take a black card and move in here, and that will absorb the spill. Here we go. Okay, I've got that. Next, I want to get to these onion skins down in here, but it's really difficult because this rock, this stone, is in the way. So I'm going to go in behind the stone, and I'm going to build up a little bit of exposure behind it, behind the bone there a little bit. Now I'm just going to take that large stone out of there. I'm going to go for a smaller mask on the end of this. Now you see I can come right in. I've got all of the exposure done on the rock, so I can take it out. Now I'm going to expose these onion skins. Come down like this, okay. And a little bit right on that onion. Now there's another way I could do that. I could take one of our accessories, the fiber optic probe, and go in there and light it. Now it's a little different quality of light with the probe. It's a little softer light. There's a hood right on the end of this probe, so I'll turn it toward the camera. Now let's put the rock back in and see if we can get in there with the probe and do it. Okay, so I'm going to come in just like this. About the same exposure. Okay, there we go. So that's one exposure. We'll go ahead and run that film. This is where we would start out in an exposure series. This would be the test. This is a little too hot in here, and it's a little out of focus. But you can see we were able to get in and light the onion skins by removing the stone, and it worked quite well. You can't tell that the stone was moved at all. Before we start this next little demonstration, I want to just show you the HOSEMASTER loincloth. That contains the accessories such as the masks. It also has a pocket for putting snoots and fiber optic probes and so on in, which zippers up. Also, you notice I've got the cloth masks. We provide these so that you can Velcro them over the end, and you can cut your own custom shapes if you need them. I want to show you the snoots. This is something that I use a lot. The snoot simply snaps right onto the BCU like that. And when I use it, I'm using it for the very defined kind of light that it has. And I'm going to go right in on this flower here just to show you how I can go right in and just skim it very carefully over that. Next, what I want to show you is the light paddle. Now that's a different kind of accessory. This bayonet's onto the end of the hose, and it's got a grid in it. If you don't wish to use the grid, when I use the grid is when I'm using it as a softbox, such as over a food shot. Now, I'm going to just take the shade off. The grid comes right out, and you've got a light box, and you notice how thin it is. It's very thin. Now, that comes in very handy. If I want to slip this in between, for instance, this glass and the vase, I can do that. I can come right in between. Now, we're going to try something that might be kind of interesting here. We've got a transparency of a wine glass. We're going to tape that right into the paddle. Then we're going to do a shot where we slip this transparency or the paddle right in between the liquor glass and the vase, and we're going to reflect the image right onto the vase. Okay, let's dim the lights and we'll try this. Okay, first we've got to do the base exposure. So we'll open the shutter, put the soft in, hit the strobe. Okay, now I'm going to start with the snoot on the flower first. Shutter's closed. I've got to figure out exactly how to paint this light onto the petal of the flower. Okay, that'll be pretty nice, just like that. Now it's white, so about 2 seconds at 32.5 is fine. Okay, come in right under the stamen here, onto this other petal. And let's see, we'll come in just above. Okay, an edge on this petal, and just the edges on this petal. Now the snoot has a very defined light. I can go right in and just light the stamen. In fact, I'll make it a little brighter at one end and then fade it out. Okay, same on this one. Fade it out. Okay, now I'll go ahead and just generally light the other flowers real quickly. Get a hood on here. Okay, now we're going to slip the paddle on with that transparency of the wine glass. And I'm going to slip it right between the glass of liquor and the vase. Here we go. And we'll give it about 10 seconds. Okay, let's give an exposure for the liquor. And what we're going to do on the liquor is just go in behind it very simply and light it up. About 3 seconds. Now, I want to give a glow behind the entire scene here. And that's it. Let's see what it looks like.